It is the morning sports desk for Tuesday, January 9th. My name is CJ Baumgartner. Corey Tackman, the co-host on the morning sports desk in podcast only. Corey, how's it feeling?
Rock and roll. It's a whole new world. And I'll be Aladdin. You can be my Jasmine. Let's go on a magic carpet ride together.
This was a radio. Well, I was about to make a comment on me being Jasmine, but I felt like I just didn't even want to touch on it to have that bit go further down the road.
I just think you'd look better in that blue jumpsuit she wears.
Yeah, my navel showing off for everyone to see. It's great. It'd be awesome. But, so for those who don't know, we had a bit every morning on KWAD for the morning sports desk, and then we took that and we put it on a podcast form. So if you're somebody who already listens on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, WDenaRadio.com, nothing changes for you, except we might talk a little bit longer or a little bit shorter or wherever. But you can still get it on all those places. It's just that we aren't going to be live on the air every morning at 7:15. And while it is a downside in a couple ways, the good part is we can talk a little longer. We can just do a couple things where we don't have to be mindful that we're on the radio. It's a podcast only format. We also have a couple other things that we want to announce later in the week with maybe a YouTube page, maybe an Instagram, maybe something. We got some things to figure out. We got some things that we'll tell you about. But into the sports desk, Corey, we got a lot to talk about with high school sports across our region today. We also have Viking stuff. I mean, we could talk all week about the Vikings and things that are going on there, and I think we will. But let's start off with some doubleheader action. I'm going to grab my papers right here because I have printed off a whole lot of them. It's a boy-girl doubleheader tonight on 101.7 and AM 920 KWAD. Wadena Deer Creek goes up to Menahga. And if I look at my broadcast schedule right, it's a 5:45 pregame and a 6 o'clock tip-off for the girls' game, and the boys' game will follow immediately after that. Boy-girl doubleheaders already had one earlier this season with Parker's Prairie and New York Mills, but they're fun. We've talked about this off air a lot. Corey, what's your view on doubleheaders?
Well, I love them. I love them for a lot of reasons. I like them from the radio side of things, just because I think it's a cool product to put on the air and to have the doubleheader of action, and you get a lot of people covered in a very short amount of time. So from that aspect, I really like it a lot. From another aspect, I love that you can go to a gym on a Tuesday night and it is full of people. We are, I think, very lucky, and both of us grew up in small towns, and we really appreciate small town, small school sports. They're just a lot of fun. But one of the things that comes with it is that these small schools are full of students who are very active in a lot of different things, not just athletics or not just basketball, but maybe other athletics, maybe other activities, maybe other things that keep them out of the building on a random Tuesday night. And that means, hey, they might not go get to watch their friends. It also means at a small school that there are parents who are oftentimes pulled in multiple directions because, hey, maybe they have a son on the basketball team and on the boys basketball team and a daughter on the girls basketball team. Well, on a night like tonight, at least some friends get to be in the gym and root for each other. The boys get to watch the girls get to watch the boys. Parents aren't going to miss or have to choose between one or the other. Mm-hmm. I really like that aspect of it. I think the atmosphere in the gyms is a little more exciting on these doubleheader nights.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Basically, you get to have a packed gym, and like you said, people get pulled in every direction. Everybody's busy. But to have the boys and the girls support each other and be in the gym on that night, it just helps out. And a full gym is just fun to play in front of for both of those teams. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, the girls are going first for Wadena Deer Creek on the season. They're 6-5 overall, 0-3 in Section 8AA. 4-1 though in the Park Region Conference, 3-2 on the road, 3-3 at home. The Wolverines got a Park Region Conference win on Friday night against Pillager, 66-35. They also had a win before that against Henning, 54-39. So they're on a 2-game winning streak in the PRC. And Corey, there's a tie at the top of the Park Region Conference for girls basketball. Do you want to know what team is tied with Wadena Deer Creek at number 1?
I'm going to guess the Menahga Braves.
It's the Menahga Braves. They're 8-1 on the season, 2-0 in Section 8AA, 5-0 in the PRC. So I guess they are in sole possession of first place. I was looking at their away record. But 4-0 at home as well. Menahga lost their first game of the season to a good Walker Hackensack Akeley girls basketball team. Since then, they've won 8 in a row with wins over Park Rapids area, Henning, Osakis, Verndale, Sabika, Crookston most recently on Saturday. So they have a kind of a quick turnaround here. They get right back to it, playing the Wolverines tonight. It's going to be a good one. I mean, I think you and me both agree that Coach Pouliot and Coach Cressip are two of the top girls basketball coaches around, and it's just fun to see those guys going to have that game within the game.
This is going to be probably the best game you see this year up to this point, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, and in general, I think the boys' game should be very nice also. So you should see a nice night of basketball, and that it gets to start with this one is going to be pretty sweet. It's going to be a nice matchup. This
is my first time getting to see Menahga girls basketball this season, and I'm really excited because, of course, we know the run that they had a couple years ago, and they had a lot of seniors, and those girls all graduated. But, small town, a lot of those girls had sisters, and now they're all up here, and they had some younger girls who were ready to take their place. And last year, you could kind of see it. I talked with Coach Pouliot last year. He said, there's some inexperience here and there, and you just got to start to get these girls used to varsity play. Well, now they're ready to hit the ground running this season, and we've seen that. So it's going to be fun to get to look at that team for Wadena Deer Creek. I mean, that they're going to play great defense. They're going to be great man-to-man defense. And when it comes to their offense, I put this word in the mouth of Coach Cressip, but it's an equal opportunity offense, and it kind of allows anybody to have a great night, whether it is one of the Gravel girls, whether it's Montana Karsten, whether it's Jada Dykoff, who went something like 6 for 6 on threes last Tuesday in Henning, made her first 3 threes on Friday night against Pillager. So they have kind of any given night, you have to prepare for one of their 5 starters to have a good game offensively, and along with the good defense that they play. So it's just going to be a really good girls basketball game. Any other thoughts on that before we look at the boys?
Nope.
All right, so looking at by the way, Section 8AA girls basketball standings, since both of them are in that section as well. Right now, Menahga currently sitting in that section as the 5 seed, the 7 seed Wadena Deer Creek Wolverines right now in that one. For boys basketball, the game following that one between the Wolverines and the Braves, the Wadena Deer Creek Wolverines are 5-3 on the season overall, 0-1 in Section 8AA, 3-1 in the Park Region Conference, 1-3 on the road, 4-0 on their home court. They had a loss another conference foe in Menahga tonight. For the Braves, they're 3-7 overall, 0-3 in Section 8AA, 1-2 in the Park Region Conference, 2-3 at home, or 2-3 on the road, 1-3 at home. The Braves' last win was Pierce, Zimmerman, go on some long road trips playing in Warroad and Crookston. So nice for them to play their first home game since December 19th. It's been almost a month. So good for the Braves to get back into that home court. And like we talked about with the atmosphere, it's going to be really, really fun to get to do it with a gym that's going to be full of a lot of people.
And just a naturally and inherently raucous bunch of Menahga Braves fans. They always show out, whether they've got good teams or bad teams. In a decade of living here in central Minnesota, you can always count on Menahga showing up for games.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun atmosphere. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. So again, tonight, 5:45 pregame is the first game with the girls, 6 o'clock tip-off on 101.7 and AM 920 KWAD. And we'll have the boys game immediately after that on KWAD again. So, Corey, the biggest thing that takeaway I want to look at here with the Vikings, because it's time that we look at. We had a lot of good fun talking about high school sports. Now let's ruin it by talking about the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes, please.
They lost their last game of the season. Even if they would have won, they wouldn't have made the playoffs. And I think we both knew coming into this game, one, they probably weren't going to win, and two, they probably weren't going to make the playoffs either. So looking at this, and now that the season is done, the players yesterday cleaned out their lockers and said their final thoughts before everybody disappears into the off season. And we'll talk about all of that and the future stuff. Have plenty of time to dish out on that. So right now, I want to just ask your thoughts. What went wrong?
I think it's two big things. I feel like this is a fair comparison, or a fair assessment of this season. Two major things: turnovers. They could never get out of their own way. They almost never won the turnover over battle. When they did, they won games. When they didn't, they got beat. And they lost the turnover battle all season long, a net negative as far as turnovers go, and really just an abysmal performance from that aspect of it. The second part, I think that is, I don't know if it's equally as important, but is it's a crucial part of this, is I think in spite of the turnovers, if Kirk Cousins is healthy, we're talking about the Vikings in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they didn't have a starting quarterback. They had three backups, and it turns out when your options for quarterback are three options, it's actually zero. So not having a starter and not being able to keep the ball, a starting quarterback and not being able to keep the ball, you could probably put everything under those two umbrellas for the year. And that's a wrap for almost every team in the entire league.
Well, and I sent you this stat on Sunday, and it's important. So Matt Fries, who does some writing, whatever, Vikings coverage, he had a stat that said, final one for the season. The Vikings record this year when they win the turnover battle, Corey, was 4-0. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When they tied the turnover battle, they were 2-0. When they lost the turnover battle, they're 1-10.
Yep.
I mean, they were -12 in the turnover differential on the season, currently tied with Washington and Atlanta for worst in the NFL. And the funny thing is that even if they were just, we talked about this with the Twins in the middle of last season, even if they had half as much of the strikeouts, holy cow, like even though they did it a lot, even if the Vikings turned the ball over just a few times less, they'd be in the playoffs. Like if they had two less turnovers, like week 1 against Tampa Bay, or in the game against Chicago, or in the game against Denver, they're in the playoffs. It's crazy to think. They didn't even need to be like the most clean team with the football. They just needed to be like not 32nd, but 26th. And that whole dynamic changes. It's crazy how much that sinks your season, and it's almost inexplainable in a way.
Well, it totally tanks your season no matter what. Like, even if they would have made the playoffs and it was in play that could have happened, they would have lost in the playoffs because they would have lost a turnover battle in an important game. There's just no way of getting around it. It is probably largely unlucky. You go back a year ago, and it seemed like the Vikings defense was able to turn over the other team at the exact right moment for, I don't know, 3/4 of the season, and they ended up with 13 wins or whatever it was a year ago. There's some luck to it. There's some unluckiness to it, however it's working out for your team in that particular season. But there's no escaping it. I go back to like week 3, I think we talked about, it's the one thing you can fix. You focus a little harder. Alexander Madison didn't fumble the ball since like week 5. But so it's a fixable thing, I guess is my point. But also, sometimes you just get that stink on you, and and there's no getting rid of it. You're just the team that turns the ball over for the rest of the year. You've been poisoned, and there's no escaping it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing is turnovers. It's a little bit unlucky. And the funny thing is, when you talk about the defense, is last season they were able to get all those turnovers because they played a drop back zone. They were sitting back, waiting for you to make a mistake. So that was the thing. You give up a ton of yardage, but you'd hope at the end somebody would throw it into traffic and be there. With the Vikings blitzing to try and create pressure, which I like, they couldn't get anybody home. And that gets to the second part of the turnovers is the injuries. And it wasn't just injuries to the quarterback. The Vikings were injured a ton on defense as well. Byron Murphy Jr., who's a nice corner for the Vikings because as soon as he got hurt, the secondary felt like they couldn't cover anybody. Not that he was all pro, but he was solid in that role. And the Vikings have holes to fill on every level of the defense. And it doesn't matter what scheme you're running. If you can't get pass rush home, you're hanging your corners out to dry, which we all knew was a possibility. But even if the Vikings didn't send the pass rush, I don't even think they'd be able to stop anybody anyways, because they got to fix personnel, and that's an off-season thing we'll have to talk about.
Well, and DJ Wanham gets hurt, and DJ Wanham going down, he's not Danielle Hunter as far as getting into the quarterback goes, but he's a really important piece. Their second best pass rusher. The offense, in 3 possessions has the ball for a total of 5.5 minutes. That doesn't help your defense, especially a thin defense, especially a defense that relies on trying to put a lot of pressure on. You're tuckering those guys out along the way. It is it's a combination of 1,000 things that like we've talked about already. You can filter it all back to turning the ball over just a little too much. Having Jefferson out for as long as Jefferson out is no small thing. Heck, if you even have Jefferson back, if he's only out for half the games, rather than the full slate that he missed, that might be the difference in this team making the playoffs. There's a million things to take into account. Maybe they're excuses. I don't know, but they're all things to be considered.
Right. And that's definitely a conversation for another day of what went wrong is excusable and what can you still go, yeah, but with some of that. But I think with the Vikings, there was 2 weeks in particular that really sunk them because I think we all knew no matter if the Vikings were fully healthy, that final month of the schedule going to Cincinnati, Detroit, Green Bay, going to Detroit, that you needed to set yourself up in the best position possible for that stretch. And the Vikings went in 7-6, which wasn't horrible, but they needed to win 2 out of their last 4 ball games, and they won none of them. So things fell apart quickly for them. But it was those 2 weeks before at Denver where you had a 2-score lead in the second half and couldn't hang on, and at home against Chicago where you soiled yourself a little bit. And losing those 2 games, if the Vikings win those 2 games, they're in the playoffs, Corey. Like out of all the injuries, out of all the turnovers, those 2 games were winnable. They were there. You had leads late in both of them, and you couldn't get it done. And that's, again, now whether they go anywhere in the playoffs, I get it. And we just said that. But those are another couple weeks to kind of consider where things went wrong. But so we've talked about turnovers, and we, like you said, we called that early in the season, and we kind of saw that coming from a mile away. Let's go into some places where we were wrong. So, Corey, let's make me look like an idiot here. It's not.
Can I just tack one thing on really quick? I know hindsight is 20/20, but if you don't lose to Tampa Bay, you're in the playoffs. I mean, you can cherry pick a lot of different parts of the season, and you're absolutely right about the end of the year. But they wet themselves in week 1. And we knew it was bad because we were all looking at the schedule, and it's like if they can come out of this month with this record, it should be okay. And they didn't because they wet their pants against Tampa Bay that early.
Right, exactly. Week 1 when they lost to Tampa, I didn't want to be the guy that went season over because that's too hyperbolic. But also that was like a yeesh. Week 1, and I'm already concerned about I'm already just uneasy is not a great way to start. And that was with the Vikings fully healthy. that was with a fully healthy Kirk Cousins, a fully healthy Justin Jefferson. Like there were things in that game, and it's all an off-season conversation to really dive into the weeds on it. But you're right. I mean, there's
that
things
one game totally encapsulated the rest of the season. They have a propensity to turn the ball over in the wrong spots of the field, and they have a propensity to get down. And can they scramble? Can they not? Looks like not.
Exactly. So, Corey, let's make me look pretty dumb. That's pretty easy to do. Let's go through the schedule. The record I predicted, I think this was at the beginning of the season. I wrote it down on paper. Actually, this might have been when the schedule released, because I see I have something here written in late May. So either way, point is summer 2023. Here was my prediction on the season. Week 1, Tampa Bay, win. Nope. Week 2, Thursday Night Football at Eagles, loss. Right on that one.
Yep.
Chargers, I thought they could win that one.
Yep.
No. Panthers, I thought they would lose because I didn't think Carolina would be that big of a tire fire. So that's
one of the biggest.
One of the biggest, and not going to get any better. Chiefs, loss. Figure that one out. Chicago, win. Easy. 49ers, I thought that one was like the easiest loss I could chalk up on the schedule, and that was the one game where the Vikings play like a legitimate Super Bowl contender. So at Green Bay, I thought they would lose, just going into Lambeau, whatever, and turns out, again, one of their best play games of the season, but the real L they took was losing Kirk Cousins that day. I knew they could win against Atlanta. I knew they could win against New Orleans. I thought they could win in Denver. I thought Denver was a mess, and turns out they are a mess, but the Vikings just let them. It's the SpongeBob meme where Plankton's sitting there going, let him have it. And he just goes, you can have it. And that's basically what the Vikings were in that game. Chicago I thought they would win that one. So I was wrong there. And then I thought they'd beat the Raiders, which they did. I thought they would lose in Cincinnati. Now, granted, I didn't think it'd be Mullins versus Browning. But, and then I thought they could beat Detroit. I thought they would split with Detroit and beat Green Bay at US Bank Stadium, so they would split with the Packers. So I had them splitting. I just had the dates wrong. I had the Vikings at 10-7. Turns out they were 7-10. Yeah. I mean, that was, if you look at the high end of the Vikings season, it probably was 10-7. If you look at the low end, it was 7-10. The Vikings are too talented to be less than 7 wins. And that's kind of where they're at right now.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of things that they're going to have to talk about in the offseason.
I think when I went through, I don't remember some of my picks. I think one time I had them for 12 wins as my exceedingly optimistic, like, hey, why not? If things are going right for your team, this is, hey, this is a game you should win, those sorts of things. I think my worst pick for them was nine wins. And gosh, they should have had 9 wins. They just should have had 9 wins. I don't know. It's bums me out. Like, it's going to be fun to watch the playoffs now moving forward. I always like watching them, but it's puts a little different spin on your Sunday when I just don't care. I've never been the kind of person to like, hey, I'm going to let me root for Kansas City, or let me root for, like, I'm not going to root for Detroit. It'll be cool if they do well, but I don't have a rooting interest in anybody. It's boring.
Right, exactly. You just hope for chaos in the NFL playoffs, which is what I always hope for. All right, Corey, I think we've kind of hit the end of our notes today. We are done for the morning sports desk, and episode 1 is a podcast-only format. Again, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as WDenaRadio.com. Check out the KWAD and Superstation K106 Facebook pages. We'll have the links on there as well. Corey, let's do this tomorrow.
Goodbye.